that better? Not yet?
We have to have some technical difficulties, or it would not be a normal event.
I touched it.
There.
That's what happened.
Well, there you
Very
go.
good.
Okay.
Thank you. Are there any other pastors here?
Yeah, hold it up.
Are there any other pastors here? You're the closest one. All righty. Right here? Yeah. Pastor, I don't think I've met you. You look familiar.
But I'm no longer pastoring the church, but I'm still ordained.
Your name?
Dirk Cedergren from Calvary Chapel Red Wing, but I now go to Our Savior's Lutheran Church.
Yes, sir. I have seen you before. I think we lost it again, didn't we?
You gotta hold it close. Oh, Lordy.
It's about as close as you can get. The Lord will hear me, so we'll just go ahead.
I'm going to change the batteries.
All right.
It's going to have to be an emotional prayer.
It has to be.
Dig deep.
They all fell out.
Lord,
They were using
My old glasses, bro. These are about 15 years old.
recycle.
These glasses. These aren't my birth control glasses, but they're pretty close.
There we go. Well, this is pretty good. This is better than most of our church services. We're getting started early. All right, let's bow for prayer. Father, I love you. I thank you for the privilege that is ours to have grown up and lived in this incredible nation. Lord, you know the struggle that we're in. We know that it's a spiritual battle, a spiritual warfare out there. Lord, I just pray that we will learn things tonight that will equip us to be better servants of yours, and Lord, that our republic would be preserved. Thank you, Lord, for Wes, and thank you for how he lines up these meetings, and pray for Rick, that you would just give direction tonight. I pray that you help us to be able to comprehend and understand everything, and Lord, that we would be wise, Lord, in the days to come. Lord, again, we pray for your mercy. Pray you'll send a revival to our country. Pray this in your very precious name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. All right, so how many of you are here for the first time? Raise your hand. All right, great. How many of you are intending on attending the precinct caucuses and have not actually been to a caucus before? Good, you came to the right place. Okay, so the reason I'm asking this is because last night I kind of had an epiphany, and so the normal way I do my presentations, because of the emergency that we're under, which is we have caucus night coming, and you need to be equipped to know what to do. I kind of moved that up to the top. So I'm kind of cheating here, where you're actually going to see some of the conclusions first, and then we'll get into the actual evidence and some of the data, and then near the end, I'll actually address the Mike Lindell situation. Okay? So those are kind of the three segments. So buckle up, get ready. I know Wes doesn't want me to tell a whole lot of jokes, but I am a nerd. The glasses are evident. I grew up in Minnesota, born and raised here, went to the University of Minnesota, received a political science degree. After that, I kind of started my own computer consulting business kind of on the side, and then worked my way up, basically working on computers at different companies and organizations, the Target Corporation, Belay Brands, Help Systems, IBM Global Services, nothing major. And then kind of after working for a number of organizations, I was like, I'm just going to go out on my own. And so for the last 12 years, I've been running my own company, RNG Visions. And I help out small users, medium-sized companies, even startup businesses move up into medium-sized companies. And so I get exposed to a lot of different industries, a lot of different theories, and one of them actually kind of forced me to develop a database for the credit collections industry. And so I understand numbers, I understand theories, zip codes, how many people live in an area, all of that kind of fun stuff. So I have access to like U.S. Census data, all that kind of fun stuff. So that's where some of this comes in. Also, when I was living in St. Bonnie, I ran for city council, became a member for 4 years as just a counselor, and then ran for mayor, and then served as mayor for 10 years. So I understand the political part. Now, obviously, as a small town mayor at $3,000 a year, I barely broke even for my political science degree at the University of Minnesota. So such a career politician. And then while I was mayor, I served for 8 years as the co-chair of the 3rd Congressional District for the NNGOP. So yes, in my affidavits that I filed in the early court cases, I did show my bias, which then Steve Simon and his attorneys made sure that my bias was honest, which I already disclosed in the top part of my affidavit, and he claimed that I was too partisan. Data is not partisan, data is data. So I'm glad he clued in and did a background check to make sure that I was telling the truth, that I was partisan, and wasted taxpayers' money to do it, even though I already gave him the answer. So, so Susan Smith is not here tonight. She's kind of working on her next stages of her cases. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And there's some developing things that are happening there. At Midwest Swamp Watch, there are a couple videos out there that you can actually watch. There's a little 5-minute one that kind of gives you a primer to kind of what we discovered in January of 2021 and some of the early evidence. And then there's a 1-hour long video that I kind of show some of the actual evidence of the database, because that was one of the early contentions in the lawsuit was like, well, he doesn't really have the data. Well, then I prove it by showing it on YouTube. And YouTube hasn't banned us because obviously our information is right, that they can't strike it out. And then there's a 3rd video out there that talks more in depth about the Mike Lindell case and how 52% of the counties failed a basic credit card security test. And so did the Secretary of State site. So, and you can find that at MidwestSwampWatch.com. If you find any evidence, have any questions, feel free to send an email to tips@MidwestSwampWatch.com. But kind of taking a step back, everybody should have high expectations of the way that their government is run. We should never give up on that. There should be honest, integrity, and oversight. Everybody agree to that?
Yes.
All right. Anybody not agree? Okay, I didn't think so. Just want to make sure we're on the same page. All right. So now, just as a quick primer, these are the Olmsted numbers. Don't worry, the surrounding communities, I'm going to have future slides for you where every single county that touches Olmsted, I've got those numbers too. Okay? But just as a quick primer, in the 2020 election, on November 24th, the state canvassing board said, this election is certified, it's a done deal, and these are the people elected in Minnesota. So, in Olmsted County, there were 91,864 ballots cast. Okay. 52,000 of those were absentee. But what's interesting is that the Minnesota Secretary of State's website tracking, there's an Excel spreadsheet that you can download, and then you can basically highlight all of the precincts and see the total number of votes. And there's some extras. It shows 203 extra ballots in the count. And they don't explain it. Your county doesn't even explain it. But then we were working with legislators and other activists to try and get public information from the Secretary of State of, there's actually something called the voter history. And what it does is it's data that shows you how a voter voted, whether it's absentee, mail, or at the precinct. Okay? So that's 5 days after the state of Minnesota said, A-OK, we got an election. At that point in time, for Olmsted County, they only had 90,017 ballots connected to a voter. That means 1,847 ballots, we don't know who cast them. Let me say it again. 1,847 ballots, we don't know who cast them. Yes, sir.
What does it mean when you say ballots are connected to a voter?
So in this database, we can actually see who voted and whether they voted at the precinct, absentee, or by mail, like if they were a mail-in precinct only. So that's not good. We should know and be able to account for every single ballot that walked in the door, right?
Right.
There should be, so that's how you have public oversight and election integrity, is that the November 24th number should equal the November 29th number. It does not. That's where it gets really bad. Where it gets even worse is that for the absentee ballots, out of that 1,800, 1,751 of those are absentee ballots. In the state law, it says when the ballot board receives an absentee ballot, it must be immediately entered into the statewide voter registration system. That's this database. The state law talks about the database as being one unit, one database. It doesn't talk about different modules, different data sets, or anything like that. The legislature was very clear. One database, one set. We are aware that the absentee ballots go into a separate module called the absentee ballot received set. But what's interesting is that as those absentee ballots are coming in, it's not updating the voter histories. I want you to ask yourself, why not?
Why not?
Right? Why not? This is where the gateway for fraud opens the door and people can walk in and commit fraud. And we know this because now we have actually written evidence of how it works. We were all told at the ballot board level that if you use an electronic poll pad or if you use the paper poll, the day prior or the morning of, before all the precincts open up their doors for the in-person voting, those registration lists are supposed to indicate who voted absentee. Okay? They didn't. They don't work. We actually have documented evidence of multiple voters voting more than once, and they admit that they had voted absentee, and because they went to the Secretary of State's website to see if their absentee ballot was received, and it didn't show up, they showed up at the precinct, and guess what they were able to do? You got it. They were. And guess what? We have proof from Sherburne County of 2 voters that did exactly that. The police investigated it, and the county attorney is refusing to prosecute.
Why?
So now, we have evidence in our hand, due to our due diligence, just in the last 2 weeks, we now have written copies. We just got it on Friday.
Did they vote Democrat?
We don't know how they vote. So, and then for Olmsted, they're not huge numbers, but 5 people did die before October 20th and cast ballots. So, and I understand some of the sensitivity here, where deaths are actually really tough, and here's why. So, number one, let's say you die outside of the county. It may be a while before you get the death record in your county to notify the county auditor that that person has perished. So there's no way to pull that ballot out. Okay. Another thing is, if you don't have your ID on you, again, it's still hard. And so I understand that one, but the next one, 25 people in Olmsted County voted more than once. So that's something that we want to work with a team here in Olmsted County to actually show them the evidence and walk through all of those voter IDs, and I can show them, because I have now 15 databases, that I can actually show them how long those duplicate ballots stayed in the system. For some counties, it's for 2 months. Some, it's been an entire year that we see that evidence.
Hey Rick, can you show Will the data show if they voted more than 2 or 3 times?
Yes. Most voters voted twice. There's only one voter that accomplished the feat 4 times in another county.
Brave.
All right. So now I'm going to go into caucus. So those of you who are new to this whole precinct caucus thing, don't worry. It's not a form of COVID, and it's not a way to expunge things from your lungs. Okay? So in basic terms, I'm going to read you this. It's a meeting of your neighbors within your voting area that get together to basically say, not it. No. You need to stand up and say, it's time for me to take a stand, and I want to help select the candidates. I want to help run the meetings. I want to help vet candidates. I want to support candidates, and I want to establish election integrity. I want to volunteer to be an election judge, and I want to help my local political group be able to write letters to the editor, show up to meetings. That's the gateway to political activism in the state of Minnesota. February 1st, 7 p.m., show up. Okay? And so here's kind of the expanded piece here. You can choose volunteers who will organize political activities. So whether it's dinners, speakers like this, all of those types of activities. You can also discuss issues and ideas for the party to support at a federal, state, local area. So it is actually a gateway, if you have an elected representative, for you to have a direct connection to your state senator and your state house member. So if you care about election integrity, you become a delegate, they're going to seek your vote to get nominated and to get endorsed. So this is your chance to hold them accountable. So if any legislator says there was no election fraud, oh, stay tuned, I'll show you more of the evidence. Okay. But then also you have a chance to move up. So from this caucus, you'll be able to get right into the area where you can support your legislators. If you're selected a delegate to the next level, to whether it is for a congressional or the state party, now you're talking about endorsing a congressional candidate that you can hold accountable. And at the state party, this is the big year. This is a chance to replace Secretary Simon, the governor that you all love, the lieutenant governor, and also, not to name names, Keith Ellison. To be direct. Okay? According to state statute, there'll actually be a straw poll that night for people who attend precinct caucuses to give support to a gubernatorial candidate that you think is doing a good job. For half of the candidates, the next day, they stop their races. If they don't see your support, they stop running. So if I don't want to hear anybody in this room now say, I didn't attend and I was disappointed that the candidate I liked didn't carry on forward. That's on you. It's on you, your neighbors, everyone else. Is that clear for what caucus night is?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Again, there's the time. Go ahead and put that in your calendar if you're not aware of it. If you want to find out where your caucus is, this is where you take a picture. Right?
Unless you're a convener, then you need to be at 6:30.
Right, exactly, if you're a convener. And actually, you want a little strategy? Most of the conveners may not know exactly what's going on, but there's a script there in the envelope, and some of the rooms may not actually have a convener. You should volunteer to be that convener, because guess what? They'll probably select you as a delegate, too. Right? So if you don't know where your caucus is, take a picture of this with your phone, and Secretary Simon will tell you exactly where your caucus location is. Some of you will be by yourselves. Some of you might be in a high school or in a church with other precinct members, and they might segregate you into different rooms. But another thing that if you want to get kind of to be a delegate position, that caucus convener needs a little extra help. You should actually, if you want to be really nice, if you're there early, go right behind the table and help people sign in. Because now everybody sees you, and guess what they think you are? They think you're in charge. And guess what they're going to do? They're going to vote for you. All right, so again, why should you attend? It's the gateway to the political process in Minnesota. You can propose changes to the party platform, so such as the party goals. So like if you care about election integrity, you care about voter ID, you care about getting rid of abortion, you care about lower taxes, this is the time to write resolutions and put those in. You can also propose resolutions change local, county, state, and federal laws. You may even get lucky that you may have an elected politician attending your precinct caucus. You can have a little conversation with them to say, you know, you're doing a good job. Or, you know, that, how do you feel about X, Y, and Z in our community? So that's a good place to do it. You can also help your local party interview, vet, and support candidates. You can sign up to be a precinct election judge for Election Day. They'll have those forms right there. The deadline is, I believe, May 1st to sign up to be an election judge. The same thing is true for ballot board judges, where they need you for about 46 days. Okay, and I'll talk more about that later.
Different place?
Say again?
Is it different place? You have to sign up in a different places?
Yeah, you do. And so that's actually a good question. So with the way that the election judges are, and Olmsted County is one of them, and those of you who are in Rochester, you actually have to sign up in a minimum of 4 places. At the party, so they know your party designation, with the city of Rochester, if you live there, and Olmsted County, and in the 4th place is let Minnesota Voter Alliance know, so that way if you're rejected, they already know that you were on the approved list and they can help question and file lawsuits on your behalf.
Do you have to declare a party?
If so, this is a good question. Do you have to declare a party? There's kind of an asterisk right now. But at the precinct level, yes. And here's why. Because at the precinct level, there's actually 4 major political parties in the state of Minnesota. The Republicans, the Democrats, and the 2 pot parties. Okay? And in Minnesota statutes, no one party can have a majority of the judges. So that means the 2 pot parties could literally have all of their folks there, and the Democrats and the Republicans could be sitting over going, so not us? And the county could say, yeah, not you guys this year. Because statutorily, no one party has a majority. But this, and the reason why I say do register in all 4 places is because there was a little issue with the MNGOP during the 2020 election. Over 10,000 people actually registered to be election judges, but the party uploaded the data in the wrong format, and Steve Simon rejected it, and the state party didn't do its due diligence, so only 3,500 crossed the finish line. So this is where we have to be on top of it. All right, let me get back to here. You can also learn about local issues in your school. I mean, CRT is really not a big thing right now, right? City and county, and help educate other voters as well. So for example, a lot of these different meetings, they may actually have in future meetings outreach programs or letter programs that basically help support candidates get the issues out there. And so parties can do independent expenditures if you help them out to kind of do additional voter education, if you will. 7, you can become a delegate to support and decide who gets the party nomination for the legislature, U.S. Congress, and the constitutional offices, governor, secretary of state, etc. You can also help the party by becoming involved in issues you care about. People think that the Republican Party is this huge organization. It's not. There's literally 2 people there. They're so underfunded, so understaffed. Do you know where the real power is? Right here, in this room, ready to launch. You guys actually control the destiny of the party. So your inaction causes the loss. No one's coming to save you.
That's right. Yeah.
That's right. If you don't, who will? Right. And so we all have to be together as Christians to be an open, welcoming party to represent each other well and to be graceful about the different ideas that we're going to be exposed to and try to work together to move the ball to get good quality candidates across the finish line. All right, also number 10, this is one of the most beautiful things. We know it's going to be cold. You can say the pledge with other like-minded individuals, hey, on a cold winter night, what a better way to warm the heart. All right. So this one here, you might want to take a picture of. This is literally the agenda in a consolidated format of what's going to happen that night. It literally has to happen in this order with one exception. The governor's straw poll supersedes everything else because they got to get it done by 8 o'clock. Because they got to turn in those numbers, phone them into either their BPOU or their congressional district, so then the next group can then send it into the state party, and then that goes to the Secretary of State's office for publication right away. So that way it can hit the 10 o'clock news as to who is in the lead. Okay. So you have all the opening stuff, the call to order, pledge, get there early, intro of the temporary officers. If long lines, they'll start reading the letters of the gubernatorial candidates or U.S. Elected officials, U.S. Congress, etc. Intro of legal requirements of today's caucus. They'll literally read some of the state statutes of why you're here tonight and how the state of Minnesota actually regulates this through state statute and what has to be done. Okay. They'll also introduce anybody who's under 17 or there that's not really part of your precinct. That's, you know, like if it's the media, observers, etc. They could even be high school students that are there for their history class or a political science class to kind of get a credit for their course, and that's okay. Then you'll elect the chair, the officers, and tellers of the caucus. People get really scared by this, but I'm going to tell you, at that meeting, that's where it starts, and for most BPOUs, that's where it's ends. Even though your term is 2 years, you literally just help run the meeting, take the notes if you're the secretary, and if you're a teller, help count the votes, and that's it. Don't be afraid. Volunteer to be one. It'll increase your likelihood of being a delegate. Okay. Then the governor's straw poll. Then you'll select delegates and alternates for Senate and congressional districts right from there. In my hometown area, it was actually a fight to not it, and it was funny how we would have 16 allocated to us. We would have 1 delegate and 15 alternates. That's how committed they were. But hopefully you guys, and so if you want to become a delegate, I advise you to bring 6 friends with you, and you just tell them, all I need you to do is vote for me to be delegate so I can get to the next level, and then you can go home. People actually do that, and I just want to share a strategy. So if you want to be in the game, this is how you do it. Then this is where you can sign up. They'll have a sign-up sheet for the election judges and poll challengers. Poll challengers are kind of worthless because in statute they really can't do anything other than go to an election judge and say, here, I observe this. They can't stop somebody from voting. They can't challenge IDs, you know, any of that other stuff. So election judge is where it's at. Okay. Then there will be platform and action agenda resolutions. They'll try to close between 9 and 10. And for those of you who are not familiar with Robert's Rules of Order, most caucus conveners, if the room is really small, it's going to be neighborly. And you don't have to really worry about this as much. But if it gets a little contested, they will default to this, and you can come up and take a picture of this. And it's also available at the MNGOP website, where you can actually download this and print it out. Okay? So I'll wait for everybody to take a picture. Everybody good? All right. The MNGOP also has a blank resolution sheet. If you have an idea of a change that you want to make to the party, a state law, a county issue, the platform, you can come here and literally download that form, have it pre-filled out, and that gives you a leg up to basically hand that in to the chair so that they can read it and people can vote on it.
So you mean, for example, we could actually print this out at mngop.com /action-center/ and we could say in our local precinct caucus, bring a resolution that voter ID be required with a photo?
Please do.
That
Yeah.
sounds like a great idea.
It is. So you can bring in all of those election integrity things that you're hearing about tonight. I'm asking you guys to do this. That same link is also where you can find the Robert's Rules of Order. You can also find the script that the precinct caucus chair is going to be using as well, so that you can have a little guide ahead of time. So everything is out there, and the MNGOP has done a great job of providing all this documentation right there at the Action Center. So use it to your advantage, especially since you guys have a head start, almost 2 weeks.
So if we do this in the small groups and
Yep.
they reject the resolution, is that okay? I mean, if they don't accept it to be even read to the local precinct and the local.
So there are a couple of hybrids. I have seen in cases where precincts have said, approve them all en masse, and just send them up. And then they dump it onto the BPOU to then have those delegates and their committee review it before sending it to the congressional district, and in the congressional districts then send it up as part of the state party. So it gives it more weight if each one is voted on independently. When they see that they're just all voted in mass and they see that in the minutes, and there's sometimes some sneaky ones that slip in, and so that's not a great way to do it. So I advise you, if you don't like consent agendas at your city council meetings, your county commissioner meetings, and some of these other boards, you shouldn't do that in your precinct caucuses either.
That's right.
So review each one individually and have a little bit of a healthy debate. Okay? So the MNGOP has made all this available for you.
Number 2 is really important.
Yep. And that is. So there is a condensed state party platform, and see if it's already covered. You'll actually see that voter ID is not in it.
Huh.
So that would be a good one to add in.
That's weird.
If you wanted to basically count all the ballots by hand, that's not there either. It doesn't go one way or the other. Here's some sample ones that I have for you. You can take a picture of these. So if you want a ready template, these are, remember I told you I'd kind of give you the conclusion first? I didn't lie. So, number 1, require state or federal issued ID for voting. 2, end vouching. 3, 14 days of absentee voting time except military.
Did you
4,
say end Fauci?
yes, I did, subliminally. You are very wise, sir. All right. So, no drop boxes, because we don't want to stuff Fauci in a drop box. So, if we get rid of that, be safe. 5, remove mail-in ballots. And the reason why is, do you know that in the state of Minnesota, those mail-in precincts, how disgusting is that they don't have the ability to go into a precinct and actually vote with their neighbors? There's something kind of, Norman Rockwell-ish about showing up on the day of election and seeing the young mom struggling with her 2 little kids, and everybody's patient there in line, and it's just kind of cool that you're there with your neighbors. And today, we're making a decision that affects our city, our county, our state, and our federal government. Today's a day that we could change the course of history. Something cool about that. So, that's just me, but okay. Removal of poll books, paper registrations only. Only relatives or court-appointed guardians can help a person vote. Staff members of facilities should not be allowed to help people vote. Right now in Minnesota, if you are at a homeless shelter, a women's shelter, a VA, a nursing home, an adult day care center, the staff can help unlimited number of people in their care vote. You can only vouch for 8. 8, restore party balance at the ballot boards. I'm a little worried that the MDA lawsuit may actually hurt us. No, and then this is to my heart, no county canvass nor state canvass until all voter histories are entered in. We should be able to have oversight over how those elections are.
Can you explain what you mean on number 8? Why that would hurt us?
So with MVA,
Minnesota Voters Alliance.
Yep, MVA. They sued Olmsted County, Minneapolis, Ramsey, and 2 others, I believe, in their group lawsuit. And what they are basically saying is, look, you counties hired employees to basically run the absentee ballot boards. And here's one of the dangerous little linchpins. Because in so many counties, they couldn't get enough Democrats or enough Republicans, they had to basically find somebody to count the ballots. So they defaulted to, an unbiased county employee who's probably not unionized, where that union donates to one party, the Democrats. Right? So when we talk about bias in the system, it's not cool. When they say that they could actually train the county employees to be unbiased, wow, I didn't even mean that as a joke, but you So I mean, let's talk about it. I mean, it's just like, really? So that's kind of what. No, so we have to step up to the plate, and caucus night is part of that process. We need to volunteer to become election judges, so that we are part of that pool that can be picked from. And especially you that are retired. 46 days at a ballot board where you're getting paid between $15 and $25 an hour is a great way to stock up a bunch of cash for the grandkiddos, right?
If you like your
46
grandkids.
days, we don't need that much.
Exactly. So that's why we have number 3 up there. Get that number down a little bit. So, it is nuts. And especially when we kind of see this in some of the data too as to why it's nuts. Now, here's something else that needs to be done too. Okay. I actually, sometimes you can learn a little bit more about yourself by looking at the other side. So I stumbled on the MNDFL website. There was this whole new term that I never heard about. It's called be a county liaison. Yeah, we don't have that at the MNGOP, do we? So that's a new position that needs to be counted immediately. And what that county liaison, when you read their website, the liaison basically gets buddy-buddy with the county auditor to kind of say, hey, you need an election judge? I'll get you one. You need a volunteer over here? I'll get you one. I'll make sure it happens. We need to step up to the plate as a party and make sure it happens.
What
We
about
don't
if
have
we
an
don't have an
auditor.
auditor? We don't have an auditor.
It's the auditor I'm using as a generic term. So the auditor used to be an elected position, but in a lot of counties they're now stampeding to make that an appointed position. So it could be an election official is what they may do it now. So great question, and we need to be doing that.
The lady in property does it.
Yep.
Records, property.
And so this is really important. And they even make sure that this county liaison is there present when the county is doing their canvassing. In Minnesota, when the 87 counties did it, there were only 3 counties that actually had a Republican in the audience. So we have to hold ourselves accountable here. Election judges. So county-specific judge applications, Olmsted County is one of them. So they have a different format that beyond the Secretary of State. So if you go in the back door to sign up at the Secretary of State's office, you still have to go to your county and do that election judge application. If you're in the city of Rochester, you have another form to do if you want to be there within their city limits as an election judge. Okay?
I have a question for you.
Yep.
Can the county tell you that the election judge positions are already filled for the year?
They can if you're trying to apply in, I'm going to say October, because the deadline is May 1st. So if they're telling you that now, it's kind of interesting because they're not supposed to vote on that at the cities and counties at the commissioner level until after the deadline.
Right.
I'll tell you, in Olmsted County, that is exactly what they're telling people, that they're using the same judges as last year and that they're already full. And that was this week.
Wow.
And
So,
I'm going to say, we are at the Marion Township.
Yep.
It's exactly the same. They said, we already have the judges. You don't need to worry about that.
Can you do me a favor and ask for a FOIA and get the names of those judges?
I can do
And
that.
what we want to do is have our BPOUs review that list to see if there's party balance. If there's not, I think we file another add-in to the Supreme Court case if they haven't ruled yet.
And I already know because they have 3 judges.
Nice.
How come there will be 3 judges? You have
To
2
make sure they
or
win.
4.
Right. Right. Yeah, it seems like party imbalance, huh? Yeah, so make sure it gets out there. Let's,
I think Bruce Cascabar is here tonight. Maybe he knows the answer to that question.
Bruce, are you here?
I saw him here before.
Okay.
Oh, he
All right.
left. Okay.
All right.
Bruce Cascabar's left the building. Okay.
All right. We'll follow up with him. So with that, please remind me and send an email to tips@Midwest Swamp Watch, and maybe Wes and I and Brian will follow up on this one. So this will be part of, we want an election integrity group formed here to help us out, and this will be one of their items as a to-do. So this is good evidence that we want to basically use. All right. So, yes, sir.
Jan Dieters of the Election Integrity Committee, CD1 Congressional District 1 co-chair of the Elections Personnel Committee, who goes out and seeks election judges. Jan and Tiffany, her co-chair, met with somebody in Rochester about joining into this effort to seek out election judges. And Jan has told me that no one's ever followed up with it.
Okay. All right. Everybody good? Everybody prepared for precinct caucuses now?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. That way, if anybody had to leave early, at least you have a to-do list, right? All right. Now we're going to get into the timeline issues of the 2020 election. This is where it gets really interesting. So we have, overall, all right, so how many of you have a bank calendar at home? Oh, those 3 ones. Right. And how about if you look at your phone, go to the November date. How many days of election do you see in there? Huh. So it's funny how they argue in court sometimes that people don't know when the election is. That we need to have 46 days of it, the absentee process. So it's just like, but everybody here in this room, whether you have an Apple or a Samsung, it shows you when election is, right?
For now.
Now, yeah. The ballot boards, so kind of the highlights across the top. So 47 days of voting, ballot boards in secret. There were a lot of ballot boards where they didn't allow the public to come in and view what was going on. And we have multiple affidavits of that. That even happened to Jonathan Amistad, who was head of election integrity for the MNGOP, and he was at Hennepin County trying to see what was going on, and he actually tried filing a case against that as well. What's incredible about 2020 is that 58% of the ballots cast were absentee. 58%. 58%. Wow. Yeah. Another thing that is phenomenal, 25% of the ballots cast were new registrations in 2020. So those are people that moved, turned 18, and who knows what, but new voter IDs. Yes?
Do you know, our citizens, when they get a real ID, non-citizens can get a real ID?
Yes.
There seems to be some confusion about that.
So
But they can't. Non-citizens can get a real ID. So if they put their license plate or their driver's license number
right.
on and then vote absentee, is that connected to the SVR, that statewide voter registration system?
Loosely. So for example, loosely. So for example, the statewide voter registration system doesn't connect to the DMV license system because remember it's broken. They've tried 3 times. Yeah. So so during that time it was still broken and broken. So 3rd time wasn't the charm for the state of Minnesota for the whole MNLARS thing, and we actually proved that in Sherburne County, where we actually brought up PO boxes and showed them the number of voters that had PO boxes in their voter registration. And when they followed up on it, she was shocked. She had county attorney was just like, oh yeah, and we actually found one that used a P.O. box for their driver's license, and that's not supposed to happen either.
Just one.
Just one. But we still have 86 counties to go through an audit, so we'll find more. Yes, sir.
What was the outcome on that with that attorney?
That one is still under review. I have a feeling that they're going to punt it. But that's okay, because all I needed was the documentation from them to prove it. Because so when Steve Simon starts coming after me, there's no voter fraud. I can go, oh yeah, here's this list. Here are statements from sheriffs and county attorneys. Now, whether or not they prosecute them or not, that's something to be debated. And this is why I want local groups within the county to see the actual evidence themselves, so then you can determine whether or not your county attorney needs to be voted out during the next time. So one way to hold these people accountable is to vote them out. Okay. The state of Minnesota was #1 in voter turnout, and Susan and I would say also #1 in cheating. When I say 38.9% of the data is missing, so that's the November 29th, 5 days after certification, I as a data person helping the cases in Minnesota, which have a filing deadline of December 1st. So December 1st, I'm going to the attorneys saying, I really can't help you because I'm missing 38.9% of the ballots connected to a voter. So in theory, I really can't tell you the total number of P.O. boxes, dead voters, duplicate voters, all of this stuff. So how can I give you accountability of an election when I don't have access to the data? And there's actually 2 different types of elections in Minnesota. So I have to back up a little bit. The one election is the absentee ballot process. Remember when I talked about once an absentee ballot is received, it must be immediately entered into the statewide voter registration system? So at that point in time, we actually get down to here. Over 730,000 absentee ballots were not connected to a voter 25 days after the election and 5 days after state certification. So that's the piece of the law that we hung our hat on in regards to the lawsuits.
How many?
Is that Minnesota?
Minnesota. The state of Minnesota had 734,000 ballots not connected to a voter on the absentee side. We already saw your guys' number, 1,700.
Yeah.
Right?
That's
So that's how it's connected. Don't worry, you weren't the worst. There's some other ones that are really bad. Yes, sir.
You said a lawsuit. What lawsuit is that?
So Susan Sjogren Smith, her first case was actually to try and stop the certification. And she actually filed a notice because here's this terrible thing about this. The canvassing board is made up of 4 judges, 2 from the Supreme Court and 2 randomly from district courts, and then the chair is Steve Simon. Okay. So Simon is supposed to present the report, and then they make the determination if this is on the up and up. The only way that you can serve the judges, you're going to love this one, is you can't serve a judge at their home or their work. You have to serve them through, not making this up, Keith Ellison's office. So that is a future case that we're working on, is we have to determine whether or not Mr. Ellison properly served the judges, because during the audio recording when Simon has to ask through the process, is anyone aware of any irregularities or any open cases, and they all say no. So either they all lied or it wasn't delivered.
I say both.
Right. So there is, unfortunately, we have to raise a ton of money to create this case to basically force the judges to decide whether it was Ellison's fault or if it was all of their faults. Okay. So this is how bad it is in Minnesota. And I'm going to rewind a little bit. Guess when these problems started?
80 years ago.
Oh, so close. I like the number 8. It's 2008. Remember the Coleman-Franken race, the 314 ballots?
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah.
Okay, and you literally can't make this up. Because remember the ballots found in the trunk?
Yep.
Yeah, that's that case.
Oh.
It's discussing what happened there, but basically what happened is during that case, a new standard came in. And I literally can't make this up now. It's literally Simon Says. Whatever Simon says is how the election is going to be conducted. So that case literally states whatever the Secretary of State determines how an election is going to be run, that's how it's going to be run.
Was he in the legislature at the time?
Yes, he was. So, and then, so this is during the Ritchie era, I believe. Now, another thing that we see, this is Susan's data set that she had started looking at, and she was kind of looking at the absentee data starting to increase, and in 2016 is a seminal point. 2016 is the introduction of the e-poll books in Hennepin County as a test. So remember when I talked about there's a super secret database over here for the absentee ballots that doesn't automatically update the voter history? When they brought in the poll books, there's now a new secret database over here for the poll books that also doesn't update the voter histories. So isn't it amazing that we introduce all this technology and we still can't get the voter histories in? Why is that? We should be asking that. Why are you creating all this technology, forcing us to spend millions of dollars, and you still can't get the work done? Your system, which we have proof now, when you vote absentee and you have a poll book, doesn't prevent a person from voting again. So the systems behind it are broken, and so are the processes. So when we look at this spectrum of incompetence and corruption, there are no other choices. It's all about the degrees of how far each of one of the steps they're choosing to take. Does that make sense for everybody? So, and then we see here in 2020, 1.9 million absentee ballots cast because of COVID and other reasons. But remember, out of that 1.9 million, 734,000 absentee ballots that must be immediately entered into the statewide voter registration system. 5 days after certification, I don't know who they are.
And again, how many of those were in Olmsted County?
1,700.
Okay.
Yep.
What was their excuse for being able to certify them?
Because they can, and you weren't going to hold them accountable. They had a deadline to meet.
And that's about 2% of the total number of registered voters in Olmsted County, so it's a significant chunk of change.
Right.
Giving Carla Nelson one by 900 and Senjum only one by 1,200 or something.
Right, and so if we, so even thinking about 2008, 314 votes to separate an election. You far exceeded that. Carla Nelson, you're exactly right. She won by a little over 900 votes. You know, 1,700 ballots not connected to a voter. Somebody could have challenged her election as a Democrat.
You would think the Democrats would have been upset about that, but they were just fine.
Oh,
so that's interesting, right?
Wait a minute.
Did they contest?
Do you think that the Democrats didn't want to open up a case because they didn't want discovery?
No, they didn't want us to know what was going on.
Right. Yeah. Discovery is a terrible thing when you're a truth seeker. For the other side. All right. So then, how did we get here? April 2020. So this is kind of interesting. These are the consent decrees that Steve Simon, so he actually went to the legislature and said, hey, COVID's coming, let's make it easier for the voters to vote, and will you help me out? Here are some ideas that I have. The legislature said no. No, thank you. So Steve Simon started out the right way, which is by the U.S. Constitution.
What?
By the U.S. Constitution, it is the state legislatures that are supposed to set the time, manner of the election. And then he didn't. So after he got the big no, he decided to talk to a couple friends and said, hey, I got an idea. Why don't you sue me, and then I'll have my bestie, my lawyer over here, who represents the state, not to name any names, Keith Ellison, work out a settlement agreement with you that the courts will approve, which of course mostly are appointed by who? Oh yeah, the Democrats. And the beauty of the judge that was actually overseeing these consent decrees, I cannot make this up. Way back in the time machine. Oh, maybe back up. You're not supposed to have bias as a judge, right? You guys are aware of that?
Yeah.
She used to be the political director for Amy Klobuchar.
You can train on that. Oh!
Is that bias?
No.
No.
So for those of you who are attorneys or have attorney like-minded friends, I would encourage you to file a complaint with the judicial board and actually say she had bias and should have never have ruled on these consent decrees. Because it's all Democrats getting everything they want. However, remember, this is why I led with the precinct caucuses. You know, it was time to get involved. Yeah, not a single Republican attorney filed in any of these cases to try and even put up a defense to prevent this stuff. So the MNGOP was asleep at the wheel when that happened. So, and here's another interesting piece here, is remember, the powers of the government shall be divided into three distinct departments: legislative, executive, and judicial. No person or persons belonging to or constituting any of these departments shall exercise any of the powers properly belonging to the others, except in the instances expressly provided in this Constitution. So when Steve Simon usurped the U.S. constitutional authority to give our state legislature, did he break that law?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead and file a complaint on that one.
Why hasn't anybody already?
We tried.
And then
we have, and so
it stopped.
It stopped. So, for example, I'll talk more about Susan's cases afterwards, but there were 6 additional cases that she filed after failing at the canvassing board. So then December 1st, so her writ was in the 24th before they met, and then she got notice that it was served by Keith Ellison's office, so we do know that. Then December 1st, she gets the other filings in, along with Jane Bowles. So they put together the 6 cases that are out there for the 5 congressional races, and also Tina Smith on behalf of Jason Lewis. Yep. So, where should we start to secure our elections? Those 2. Voter ID and ballot boards. So remember, it's not about who votes in the election, it's about who counts the ballots.
Right, exactly.
It's so true. So if you don't have party balance, what do you expect to have happen? Right? Let your imagination run wild. The only way to end conspiracy theories is to be involved and to have transparency. So local control, local oversight, and local accountability is the antidote to conspiracy theories. I agree with Steve Simon on that point. And that's where it ends. All right. So for those of you that are curious about what is that statute that requires that must immediately thing, yeah, it's right here. So Minnesota Statute 203B121, it's the record of voting. So you guys should use this when you talk to your county auditors, your election official in Olmsted, and also your county commissioners. So, hey, county commissioners in Olmsted County, when you certified an election in Olmsted County, did you know over 1,700 ballots that were absentee that were required to be must immediately entered in weren't? And then you should say, this is why we're recommending a forensic audit of Olmsted County. Because we are going to start a ground canvassing game here, not a game, but a ground canvassing team here in Olmsted County that will go knock on the doors to validate how people voted. Mm-hmm. And then that will collect the evidence that you need. So that way if a voter says, I didn't vote absentee, you should be able to get pictures of those outer envelopes to to go back to that voter to establish confidence that it was either their signature or not. That is the only way you're going to establish confidence in the 2020 election. And you need your county auditors, your county commissioners to submit a resolution to Steve Simon to conduct a forensic audit.
So we don't have an auditor, so it'd be our property gal that
Yes.
certifies the county election then?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, but so she helps in certifying it. It's your county commissioners that act as a canvassing board
So
to
they
certify
sign it
the
at
election.
county board meeting?
Yes. It's actually a separate board meeting.
Yeah.
It's a county
That's
canvassing board.
Right.
And so your commissioners act as those canvassers for your county, and it's their responsibility. They don't know that, and so this is an education piece where we need to start holding them to account.
Is there somebody here tonight who would want to be the point of contact for that sort of effort here locally? Maybe make yourself known. Think about it. Make yourself known later on. If you want to be on the ground game with this guy. Okay. Oh yes. So we have. Yeah. You're going to be doing that with the county commissioners.
I don't mind standing up in front of them.
What's your name, sir?
Roger Mueller.
Okay.
Roger Mueller is leading the election integrity team for the Olmsted County GOP.
All right.
So reach. Yeah. So Roger Mueller is the point of contact to bring this before the Olmsted County Commissioners. Please try to make contact with him before you leave tonight.
Yep, and there's a great model that I can share with you that Crow Wing did, and we're also working with some metro, North Metro counties. So we have this in 3 phases. You guys are part of phase 2. That's why we're here tonight. And so as we go through our phases, we actually picked on counties first that were Republican, that had small issues, but they're issues nonetheless. And so Crow Wing County had enough issues that their county commissioner said, yeah, let's take a second look at this. And they passed the resolution. Now we're working with Wright County, Sherburne, Isanti, Anoka, and Chisago. That's the next wave of our first group of counties. Olmsted, with some of the other ones that you'll see here tonight, are going to be in a secondary wave. And in the third wave are all the ones that are so extreme that they literally violated deadlines and state statute. And you'll see some of that evidence tonight.
Will anyone go to jail over this?
So that's a great question. Will anyone ever go to jail over this? I'm going to say no, because the way the statutes are written, well, other than the ones that they choose where, let's say, a felon, yeah, if there was a felon voter, yeah, it seems like some counties definitely want to go after them. But some of the duplicate voters and stuff like that, no. Election officials, no. So this is where we have to use the antidote of the election process in Minnesota to clean the slate. And this is why we need accountability of local activists to look in the eyeballs of the county commissioners and say, never again. You're not getting away with this. We are raising the bar, and we demand accountability and oversight. You work for us.
Do we even know if Olmsted County has a ballot board?
Yes, all 87 counties do.
They do, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And that's for the absentee ballots.
Larry, weren't you on the ballot board?
Yeah, Peggy and I were on the ballot board. There's 2 of us here.
Yep.
And as long as we're on the topic, so that people understand, the ballot board needs like about 5 GOP judges for many days, in fact, weeks.
Yep.
Election day, we've got over 80 precincts. And what will happen is we're going to have all kinds of volunteers to be on the ballot board, and we're going to be woefully short on election day. That's what's going to happen. So I hope everyone here doesn't think, because you said ballot board is number 2 up there. Not that I disagree with you, but there's going to be a lot of disappointed people if they think they're going to get on a ballot board because they only need like 5 people.
Right, and that's why it's important to be part of the BOU process, so that you can talk amongst yourselves to communicate what's happening. So if, say, 20 of you signed up for the ballot board, and you're exactly right, if there are precincts out there that are lacking, you can be an election day judge in another precinct. So that's, yep.
And so what's gonna happen is gonna be a lot of precincts with no Republican representation.
Right.
On this fall's election. That's what's going to happen.
And so that's where we need the BPOU group to basically coordinate and keep recruiting all the way through May 1st to make sure that every single precinct has at least 2 signups. Have that commitment.
Good job.
Okay? So, thank you.
Back there, Rick.
Does your group know if all 87 counties are holding the election materials with statutory 22 months? Are they gonna disappear, have they disappeared, some of them?
To be determined. So because we have not been able to see it with our own eyes, we have to trust in good faith that they are doing that, because that would be a significant statutory violation. One of the tricky things that we're actually recommending to the legislatures is, so right now, after the 22 months, they can be destroyed. One of the legislative changes that I want to have happen, and it's just one simple line, cross out the they be destroyed, but that they be transferred to the Minnesota Historical Society for public access. So write that in one of your resolutions out there too. So if you agree with that. So I'm a little bit, you can tell I'm a little bit funny in that area where it's just like I'm a little creative. It's like, so how can I get access to it where I don't have to spend money or have their involvement? If they're going to throw it away, how about if we just ship it over to the Historical Society where it's actually a piece of history that Minnesotans own and go access anytime? And if somebody wanted to do a master's on election integrity, they could potentially do that, right? Yeah. So that'd be kind of cool. So here's a review of the Olmsted numbers. So if you want to take a picture of it because you missed it the first time, feel free to do so. So now that you've kind of had a primer of, wow, so how many of your ballots were part of that 700,000?
Yeah, did I vote?
1,700, I can.
You know that sticker they give out that says I voted? It should have a question mark on it.
Actually, we do have shirts with one of our teams. Susan Smith designed it, and it's a big "I thought I voted" sticker right on the front. So you'll see that at future events. And right now, we're giving the rights to our northern group for them to sell the shirts for the next year, so that they can help recoup some of the dollars that they spent in trying to host 16 events up in the North Metro for us. And they did that out of their own dime, all the advertising and everything else. All right, everybody's got the picture. Oh, I'm sorry, I just missed it. You can try it again back there. I always take concern when people are taking pictures because I do not have a face for TV or any picture. I have a great radio face and a great voice for books.
Voice for TV?
Yeah. All right, so here's some additional Olmsted numbers that were interesting. So, Carla.
Nels.
Yeah, so.
Wow.
Yeah, 347 votes, 909 votes. So you start thinking about where these. Yeah, it kind of gets a little concerning.
How did 3,384 people move into Nels Pearson's district during COVID-19 hashtag stay at home? There were not that many high school graduates. Could there have been that many people who turned 18 and said, I got to register to vote?
They moved in for the day.
Yeah, they're moving in between
crazy.
the colleges and also the apartments. There is throughout the state of Minnesota, there is a huge recycling of voters of about 16% already since the last election. It is tremendous. So with these rent controls, the violence happening in the inner cities, people are fleeing Minneapolis and St. Paul, and they are running. They're still voting. Yeah.
In more than one place.
Right. So how many of you are from Dodge County? Okay, darn. How many of you are from Fillmore County? All right, we got one. You're going to have to space. We've got a special case for you. Goodhue County. All right, that'll leave you out. Mower County. All right. Wabasha. All right. Winona. All right. I got a little space for you guys. So, this is the absentee ballots. This is what you're going to love. This is such garbage. You guys should be pissed in about 10 seconds as I explain this. This first column is what the canvass certified on November 24th that each of these counties had for absentee ballots. This column shows on November 29th how many they connected to voters.
What?
Dodge County literally got that one token voter in and said, nope, we're not doing it anymore.
Wow. Wow.
Fillmore surpassed them by doing 6.
Yay.
Goodyear got more than half the work done with 7,500. Mauer said, Fillmore, we'll do 2.
Hold my
Or
beer.
Dodge, yeah. Wabasha, 41. Winona, 551. Remember, must immediately.
Say it again?
Remember, must immediately. So those of you that understand mom law, when mom said go clean up your room now, did that mean 25 days later? No, it didn't. So this is where, when we sit here and we look at the application, now Steve Simon and some of the election officials and county auditors will say, yeah, but we actually have until December 15th to enter in all the voter histories. And I go, so the absentee, that's true for the in-person precinct ballots, but the absentee ballots say must immediately.
Rick, have they ever entered them? Have they entered them as of today?
Yeah, it gets a little bit better, and I'm glad you created the perfect segue. So here's the voter history deadline. So remember I said December 15th was the deadline? Well, Dodge County literally dodged the work and said, we'll turn it in on February 4th. Don't worry about it.
Wow.
Fillmore said, oh yeah, March 23rd is our date. That's when we're going to turn it in. The rest of them got it December 15th. Now the next data set I have is December 20th. So what's interesting is on December 20th, Dodge County only had 536 ballots to connect to a voter. What's up? Why did it take you so long? Fillmore, on December 20th, only had 238 left to connect. Why the delay? What's going on? What are you hiding? Goodhue, even though they said December 15th we're done, there were still 157 ballots that were cast that weren't connected to a voter. Mauer, 194 total ballots still not connected to a voter. Wabasha, 50. Winona, 162. I now report to you, remember, the Coleman case. How close that was?
Yeah.
A lot of these counties could certainly tip an election, right?
Oh, yeah. Easy.
When a statewide race. This is why we're taking some of the next actions at Midwest Swamp Watch, where we are actually trying to work with all candidates that are running, all BPOUs that send out mailers. Anytime you get a mailer that bounces back, get it to us and we'll work with the local group to go to the county auditor to remove that person from the statewide voter registration system. If we can lower the amount of fake voters out there, we might give enough candidates to win elections.
Do you have addresses in Olmsted County of places yet that you would want people to go to?
Yes.
To certify those?
Yep.
Or even graveyards if you want us to visit the deceased?
Yes, exactly. And we will continue to request data from the Secretary of State's office so that every month we will have data that we will want verified.
Can you help me understand this for sure, just
Yeah.
so I have it down solid?
You got it. I know it's shocking, isn't it?
It really is. Terrible.
So they're not connecting the voter
Yep.
with an actual
Human being.
Ballot. Yep.
So some provisional ballots, should we add that to your list? We should not be a provisional ballot state anymore.
Exactly. That's true as well.
Yeah.
So I'm going to count on you to put that into your precinct caucus. All
We're
right.
only one of 2 states.
Yeah. I have to do a top 10 list, so you're right. So, I could go all night. Trust me. Wes is witness to this, and so is.
Yeah. Midnight oil.
So here's supposed to be a check and balance that you're going to love about this system. So we actually have something that's called a post-election review. You'll hear PER. And what it's supposed to do is establish confidence in the system that the electronic tabulators are actually accurate. Okay? And so what they're supposed to do, I kid you not, is before the election, select the 3% of precincts that they're going to hand recount after the election. Do you understand the in between the lines there? So they know before the elections which ones they're supposed to go in and inspect. So, Raul, make sure there's no errors on those 3. None. Because we know that those are the ones that are going to be hand counted.
Wow. It's not really a spot check.
Then, so after the election, then what they do is they take those precincts and they all get together in a room that's supposed to be public, and they literally hand count all of those ballots within those randomly selected precincts before the election, and they then compare the machine register tape and what the volunteers counted on that day. Is that clear? Mm-hmm. Isn't that garbage?
Yes.
Okay. There is only one county in the state of Minnesota that actually breaks that statute, and that county auditor says, yeah, I wait until after the election, and then I randomly draw 3 precincts. Wow. That was Sherburne County.
Oh.
Which county?
Yeah, Sherburne County.
How'd it turn out there?
They still have some issues there, but it's a lot cleaner. The election, we can actually see the good work that she actually does, because there was only 4 duplicate voters. And what we found out is 2 of them were valid duplicate voters, and the other 2 became duplicate voters because Mower County stole one of their voters and added an extra ballot, and another county stole another one of their voters and added a ballot. So
how do you do that? Yeah,
it's pretty impressive in the statewide work.
46 days.
Right, 46 days of opportunity. I mean, come on.
So when you asked if anybody was going to be arrested for any of this, it's probably the girl in Sherburne that's doing the right thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's, and so here's the other thing that's supposed to happen. And I kid you not, it's such a farce. If they find an error of more than 0.5% in the count between the machine and what the hand recount is, they are supposed to audit 3 more precincts within 2 days. Wow. You're going to love this. You're right. So here's what's interesting. According to state statute, this is where I'm going to get into some of the evidence here real quick. According to state statute, whatever Simon says is. Okay? So whatever's posted on the Secretary of State's website is when those post-election reviews are going to happen. So in this case, Ramsey County was supposed to happen Saturday, November 14th. Well, those folks showed up and there was no post-election review. The county board actually selected the following Monday as when they were going to do the post-election review, but there was a communication issue between the Secretary of State's office and the county commissioners as to when it was actually going to be conducted. But it doesn't matter because state statute says whatever is on the Secretary of State's site is when it's supposed to happen. And it didn't happen. Piece number 1.
I think that was on Facebook.
Yep, it was. This is Dakota County. Remember when I said there was actually a county that performed worse? Dakota County is a storm of violations. When I say ballots in the bag, yeah, during the post-election review, one of the election officials came in with that bag and said, let's start counting the ballots. Did that look like ballot security to you?
No.
No, it doesn't. And let's get back to the post-election review. So in Dakota County, they actually had to hand count 5 of the precincts. First 4 went fine. Then there was this one. They were missing 870 ballots out of 1,327. Now, this is where Wes will tell me that I'm going to cross the line. But this is apparently the new Common Core way that they said it was acceptable. So this is emerging grading, where they say this is emerging exceptionalism, because everything's okay. And guess what they didn't do? They didn't conduct 3 more within 2 days. He sent to Secretary Simon, everything was A-okay. This form right here was received by attorney Jane Bowles and is part of her case regarding CD2, the Kistner case. Susan Smith had to sign in as another attorney in case Jane Bowles had to be a witness of where she got that document. From Andy Loken, the election supervisor of Dakota County.
Unreal.
And here's a fun fact. According to state law, the election is not over until all post-election reviews are completed. So that means the state canvassing could not be certified until all post-election reviews were completed. That was the complaint that Susan Smith filed with the state canvassing board on November 24th.
Rick, can I say one thing before you keep going?
Yep.
Everybody donated a lot of nice food items up here tonight. Thank you for whomever brought whatever you brought. We have a bread basket up here where people have left some money. If you gave some money there, that's great. We're in the habit of collecting gas money to help whatever guest speakers come to Rochester. And now's the chance for me to give my Minnesota Public Radio style appeal. If you've enjoyed this kind of program, sorry, I'm spitting on you in the front row.
Please don't speak enough.
I'm going to wear my mask up here.
Right.
Oh, sorry, I don't even know you.
Yeah.
I'm salivating on her. If you've enjoyed tonight's programming, please put $1 in the basket, won't you? And
here, we'll use not the barf bucket, but the donation bucket.
Okay, this is gas money. Everything, all the proceeds tonight go to Rick. The person who paid for this venue, he doesn't want me to tell you who he is, but it's Howard Ives.
Oh,
Just want you to know that. Amazing guy.
Thank you.
So God bless Howard. Everybody remember Howard and keep him in your thoughts. And we just want everything goes to Rick. And
Yeah, it goes directly to Midwest Swamp Watch. It helps pay for the website, the database lookup that we have, where you can actually go in and review the November 29th database and actually see if your vote was connected to a ballot.
Would you say the location of the data one more time?
So it's MidwestSwampWatch.com, and we actually have some of the evidence up there. So like some of these slides, like the ballots in the bag and the post-election review, that's under the evidence tab that you can share with people as well. And then there's some additional pieces out there.
Is this slide presentation available afterwards?
Yes, part of it is. Yeah, some of it's right up there on Midwest Swamp Watch. I'll have to maybe send another set of this to Wes, but yeah. And then this is part of Susan's petition to stop the certification, and that was served prior to the certification. And so this will be an additional FOIA request that Susan has to do to be able to find out what happened with it. And she even wrote in her brief, if this court does not take action to prevent the certification of Minnesota election until a complete bipartisan statewide audit of the election occurs, including election materials, our election system and the trust of the voters will be irreparably harmed.
It was dismissed, though, right?
It was never taken up.
No hearing.
No hearing. They ignored it. All right. So this is interesting as well. So in the Minnesota Constitution, this is where we find the statewide canvassing board basically documented. So it's a constitutional issue. It's a constitutional activity. So what's interesting is that they send the election returns of the Secretary of State and the Board of Canvassers. The returns of every election for office holders elected statewide shall be made to the Secretary of State, who shall call to his assistance 2 or more of the judges of the Supreme Court and 2 disinterested judges of the district courts. They shall constitute a board of canvassers to canvass the returns and declare the results within 3 days after the canvass. I do have to warn you that 2 of the judges were active in a political party.
Democrat?
Yeah, Democrat. All right, so another quick slide here. This was my early one that I had put out January of last year. Do you think the general public is aware that the Minnesota State Canvassing Board certified an election where 38.9% of the election ballots cast were not connected to any voters 5 days after their meeting and 25 days after the election?
Oh, I saw that in mainstream media.
Yeah. Yep. So here's the other question, so whenever a reporter says, well, that's just fake, you don't understand what's going on, you can ask them one question. Have you downloaded the statewide voter registration system list? Have you analyzed the data? As soon as they say no, that's when you know exactly they are not honest brokers when it comes to reporting news to the public. There is nobody really providing oversight. This is the first time in U.S. history across the United States you have so many data analysts out there, lawyers and activists, actually reviewing an election that we all know in our heart minds is a complete joke. There is no way. So you're telling me from a fact pattern, this is where I'm going to go off script, that the guy in the basement who's white outperformed a female candidate from their side and an African American most popular president in U.S. history. That does not make sense. There's just no way. So you're telling me that the party that consistently through their primary said they didn't want to vote for an old white guy accomplished that feat in spades and outperformed a female candidate and an African American candidate from their side? There is no way. And we see that more and more in our evidence. So again, here's kind of that big red alert. And if you want it another way, I've got a nice map. How many of you like maps? Raise your hand. All right, here it is. Get your cameras ready. All right, so those are the counties that should be audited. All the ones in pink.
Pink or red?
Red, yeah, red, pink. It shows a pink on mine and red there.
What's yellow?
So actually, the yellow one here, Olmsted County.
Close it down?
It's so surrounded by corruption, it should also be looked at as well. So the way that those numbers work is that anything in the red is 6 to 100% of the absentee ballots not connected to a voter. Anything in yellow is 3 to 5%. There is actually one county that I'm going to give a gold star to, Chippewa County. They had everything done in their system by November 14th. 100%. There were no duplicate voters, no dead voters, no P.O. box voters. That was a clean one.
How many people live there?
I don't have the exact numbers in my head, but I want to say it's got to be right around 20,000. So, and then here's another one. This is of the Twin Cities area, and this is where you're going to be shocked, and you're going to understand why I'm really critical of Dakota County. Dakota County over here is responsible for 154,000 absentee ballots not connected to a voter.
Oh, wow. What are the cities in there?
Hastings.
Yeah, Hastings,
Apple Valley.
Apple Valley, part of Egan. Yeah.
I wonder Sleepy Joe
Rosemont
tour there.
is another. Yeah. And then Scott County had 46,000. Carver County, a conservative district, had 33,000 ballots. Washington County, the Stillwater area, 81,000 ballots not connected. So we should be pissed.
We are.
Remind me how many in Olmsted again?
1,700. Yep. Yes, sir.
Rick, so are they connected to the voter today?
They're a lot closer. but there's still quite a few that are not. And here's the other thing. So the database is a living database, and so it's always changing. So, and this is kind of the canard of it all. You can literally have somebody that will move right after election and show up in another county. And it looks like they voted in that county. So every time I get these data sets, I have to reload the data backwards so I know where they actually voted.
How often do you get data? How often do you download the data sets?
So we have 6 volunteers throughout the state, and some of them are getting denied now. And we've been averaging, it kind of varies. So like I took a little time off during the summer, and then I did re-amp it up for the 2021 election. And so during the 2021 election, we were getting them bi-weekly. So every 2 weeks, we were getting it so we can keep track of it, the progress. And what's really cool is that when you have multiple sets of the data, we can actually see them turning voters on and off. We can actually see voters that were disconnected. Oh, I didn't tell you this one. I also have the 2018 database. So I can actually go back to 2018 and see how many voters voted in 2018 that were removed. And that creates some dystopia numbers. And I can see how they remove voters from 2018, then all of a sudden reactivated them in 2020, just in time for the election. And then they would literally drop them off. So there was like, just in the 2020 election, it's really interesting that we start losing about 64,000 voters and then 150,000 voters since the 2020 election. You know, we lose their IDs. And so this is where it becomes a little bit important because I'm also looking at South Dakota's data. And I'll get to that a little bit later. Did you have a quick question?
Yeah. Are you willing to share your databases?
Absolutely. And I do. And so one of the things that if I share my database with somebody, I have to make sure that they understand how to use it. So number one, Excel unfortunately has 1 million record limitation. So you can't do this in Excel. You have to have some type of database.
You do Olmsted County in Excel.
Correct. So I do export the Olmsted data to the VPOU chairs and candidates that are out there. And so if you work within an election integrity group, I'll absolutely share that. And that's part of what I do with the other counties that we're working with, is I create a directory in my web folder that they can all work out of. So we can do digital canvassing, we can do updates, you'll get my latest reports of what I'm finding, and then I just have a Word document of all of the things that I'm finding.
How do we get access?
Send an email to tips@midwestswamp.com and we'll get you set up. Okay, so another thing that's really important in state statute, and you're going to love this one. Did you know that the state party chair has the ability to review the source code of the election software? Yes, I brought this up to Jennifer Carnahan when I served on the Election Integrity Committee, subcommittee for the MNGOP. And I found the statute, and people were like, oh no, you're wrong. So I emailed them the statute and said, here. So then after David Hand got elected, I provided him a quote as to what it would cost to audit 2 of them. So you have 3 of them, HART, ES&S, and Dominion, that you could go in and audit the source code. It's pretty expensive to do. I have found, after talking to 18 different organizations that are qualified to do it, only 1 was willing to even take the political risk to do it. Okay.
Out of 18.
Yeah. One of the 18 is really interesting. It's called SLI. They are the #1 certifier in the United States, and they're just such garbage, that organization. So they certified an election in 2020 in September in California of 2019. Here's what's absolutely disgusting about it. They basically said, oh yeah, everything meets standards. And I'm sitting there looking at all of the, they basically list out the server platform and the desktops that they're using. They're using Windows Server 2008 Release 2 and Windows 7. By the way, Microsoft stopped supporting that software on January 14th, 2020, and these auditors didn't alert them that this software that you're going to use will not be recommended for a 2020 election. Didn't even bother to tell them that. So that's the high standard we're working with. It's complete garbage, this whole certification process. Okay.
So Vic?
Yep.
Mr. Hahn was here for the GOP Christmas party.
Okay.
And he said that he didn't think there was any fraud in this state in the 2020 election.
Yeah, and that's too bad that he's saying that, because
The question, please?
so the question is, actually it was more of a statement. She's indicating that David Hand basically came here to your Christmas event and stated that there was no fraud in the 2020 election.
The new jury chair.
That is really disappointing, because Donna Bergstrom, we actually helped her with her case, and I did the analysis. Her case is one of the most dystopian pieces, and when you read her case, she's not asking for a judge to make a determination. She actually wants the judge to do what's allowed in state statute, to send it to the Senate floor for discovery, to have them review all of the ballots and the election materials. And it made it all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court actually makes some pretty racist comments in her decision, basically saying that they already have a token Native American in government politics, and that they didn't feel that her case was worthy of discovery.
The Minnesota State.
The Minnesota State Supreme Court. Yeah, I would encourage you to read that one. I was really pissed.
Is she Native
Yeah.
American?
She is.
Bergstrom is a Swedish name.
Yep. So, and Donna is not a dumb person.
No.
She's a former naval intelligence officer. Okay, so that is somebody who's wicked smart. So.
And is she running for office yet?
No, she's deputy chair right now. All right, so I want to give you a sneak peek to 2021. Guess what? Yep, real quick.
It was discovered that David Hahn, after he became chair of the Minnesota GOP, asked for a pay increase that was not disclosed to most people. So he elevated his salary without letting people know, and also letting people know that they needed money desperately for the GOP party for Minnesota. Just so you know.
Would he raise it?
I don't have the numbers, but I know he raised his salary. I think he doubled it, actually.
Yeah, we'll need facts on that.
Yeah.
Have you seen the source code in any of these machines?
I'm not at liberty to discuss that at this point in time, but I will tell you this part, not of Minnesota's. I will tell you that. I will tell you a sneak peek that why Susan and I ended up getting together is because before the election, she queried me, knowing that I was a computer professional, and she's like, I'm seeing this thing out in an open source program that Reddit is talking about. Can you look at it and tell me what it is? I told her, look, I'm not a computer programmer, but I did program in HVIV language, and so that's Hewlett-Packard's interface. So like you can program printers, oscilloscopes, and all this other stuff. And I also did it for National Instruments as well. And she sent me the code, I looked at it, and I'm like, oh, I know exactly what this is doing. And she's like, what? All right, so what it was is it was actually source code to adjust the sensitivity of the optical scanners of the tabulators.
Oh.
And what it was doing is, so you guys all remember the 90s, right?
Yes.
That was 75 dpi. That was the best a typical fax machine could do. Today, your typical desktop scanner can do 1200 dpi. So when you think about a piece of paper, it's like a snowflake. So I do a lot of stuff for the Federal Reserve, where I've been trained by the Secret Service on how to recognize corporate fraud, fake bonds, bank checks, fake dollar bills, that kind of stuff. If you look at your $2 bills that you have in your wallet right now, you'll notice that they're completely different. And when I say by completely different, you'll see like little thread marks kind of scattered throughout. That's like just the same as the copier paper that's sitting in your ream at home. If you look closely at it, you'll see different dust at different positions in there. So if you were to lower the DPI of a scanning system, what would not be there? All of those filaments and dust. So it's a way that some states, they would scan the ballots in and then destroy the original paper. And they would just rely on this. So thus, destroying the ability of a forensic audit to tie in the scanned image to the original source. Okay?
Yeah.
So that must have been part of Arizona's problem.
It is. So I've been involved in the back end on some of that. All right, so just to let you know, you should not be comfortable with the 2021 election in Minnesota. This is the best case ever. All right, so it is against the state law to publish election results before the end of an election. Sneak peek. Steve Simon extended the election to November 10th on the acceptance of the absentee ballots. Okay. But going back to 2021, this is, remember when I said there's incompetence and corruption?
Yeah.
I'm going to let you decide this one. All right. So this screen picture was taken 7 days after the 2021 election. So on November 9th, and I actually have a video on Midwest Swamp Watch with some of this stuff. What's interesting is that first issue is that the November 2nd, 2021 election was on the 2nd. But the last updated data is 11/1/2021 at 4:30 p.m. We have predictive voting going on here. What's even more credible about this district is that the voters registered at 7 a.m., that would be based upon the 2020 election. The number of registered voters in that precinct. What's incredible is that somehow these school board questions outperformed a presidential election. So 1262, 1298, and 1301.
Rick, can you give us our local school board?
I don't have that on here.
Okay,
but
maybe later.
Yeah, there was somebody in the area that asked for it, and I gave them all the data and emailed it to them. So,
Rick, can I say one thing?
Yep.
This is not the end, because everybody's finding this really fascinating. He's going to go on, but I just want to get this off my hands. I feel kind of sullied by all this money. You deplorables came up with $416 in gas money. Imagine what the GOP could raise if they did this, huh?
Right.
We would open our checkbooks for the GOP if they provided this.
So this money will help go towards the next phase of our database, which will be where you'll be able to validate your information, and then you will be able to click on your address to see how many registered voters are registered at your address. The reason why, you'll love this one. So Susan Smith, her daughter just bought a house in Waseca, Minnesota. They happened to see all these mailings come into the house. They talked to the previous homeowners, and they said, oh yeah, we bought that house in April of 2020, and we bought it to flip it and remodel it. Nobody lived there. Except there were 4 voters that cast absentee ballots from there. So I had to tell her daughter, yeah, you bought a fraud house. You're now a witness to our future cases.
Did some of those counties, though, they went by the number of the deed owners on that property? They went back, and that some of them got 20 different ballots?
It could be. We're still investigating that. Yep.
Yeah.
So again, here's our red alert system. Here's where you can check your vote to see if your vote counted. So db.midwestswampwatch.com. Otherwise, you can just go to midwestswampwatch.com, and there will be a link there.
I need to connect that.
Yep.
Okay, so use that example. So, did they send absentee ballot requests?
Yes, they did.
Okay, so somebody from there sent...
Filled them out?
Filled them out?
Yep.
So it came back and they got to vote?
Yep.
So there were 4 people that got to vote?
Yep.
Oh, should have voted for my dad.
Right. It's crazy. So there were some house races when we look at the data. So Robert Farnsworth versus Julie Senstein, that vote separation was 30 votes. So there's 2 arguments here. So there's the argument versus just the registration data sets. So on December 20th, they're short 407 ballots not connected to a voter. So 407 ballots on that race alone weren't even connected to a voter. That's a race that should have been challenged and forensically inspected. When I went through the data sets itself, I found 10 voters that voted more than once. I found one registered at a P.O. box, but they didn't vote in 2020. Nursing homes, there were 16 voters that voted of dementia nursing homes. And there were 4 voters that died before the election. When you add that up, that's 30 votes there too. So I have 2 ways to look at that election. Do you want to take the 407 or do you want to take the 30? Which case do you want? Another one that we would normally never look at because the vote separation is 850 votes. Remember I talked about Dakota County? In this particular race, they're short 1,927 ballots connected to a voter. That's how disgusting this election was. And there were 5 voters that voted more than once in there. This one here, just so I can remain bipartisan as much as possible. Susan versus Jeff, there was 108 voter separation, but they had 115 ballots not connected to a voter. The Democrats should have challenged that election. I don't think they wanted discovery. So when we look at kind of the vote separation and the surge of new registered voters, so this is based upon the September data of 2021. So Carla Nelson, she had 909 vote separation, but there are now 5,752 new registered voters in her district that are either turned 18 or moved into the district. College students, new renters, etc. Warren Limmer is another one. 904 vote separation in his district, over 7,400 new registered voters in his district. So one of the things that we're trying to do is we're working with candidates, working with BPOUs. We're encouraging you guys to send out welcome letters because these might be new activists that could help you promote new candidates, discover what you guys are all about, and also, if you get any returns back, you go to the county auditor and say, I have evidence that this is not a valid voter. Please remove them. So this is another one that's interesting. How many of you remember John Derek Thompson, the Hugo fame?
Oh, yeah. Sure do. Why is he still there?
Exactly. Why is he still there? So what's interesting is that, and so I was talking to Representative Lucero, wrote him information, and actually submitted the evidence that I had from the voter registration database that Steve Simon didn't do his job. Because in the media, Thompson said that he had selected the box to hide his voter registration information. It was in the database, and then it was removed. So when we talk about election integrity and security, there are actually some politicians that when they check that box, Steve Simon has a responsibility to protect them. And not everybody's going to agree with me on this, but there is somebody from Minnesota who's on the National Foreign Intelligence Committee that we have to do our due diligence to make sure that she is protected. No one should ever assault one of our representatives, even if she's on the other party. But Omar deserves protection and should never be listed in the statewide voter registration list. Because there are spies outside of the U.S. that would love to have that information. Okay?
Ship her back.
So here's a recap of some of the top counties. Hennepin County, their deadline was 12/15. They didn't even bother to file for an extension, and so they just turned in their work on December 29th. But what's really interesting is that the way that the state law reads there is that when a county asks for an extension, they're supposed to have a permanent inability to complete the work. So when you guys think about permanent inability, you're right. It includes earthquakes, tornadoes, building fires, everybody died. Right? A permanent inability. There's no way these counties classified for that, with the exception of possibly Fillmore County, where they had all new election equipment, and apparently they had a new county auditor that was responsible for doing the election and was completely lost. What the failure is that Steve Simon's office didn't come alongside that county and help them get the work done. Okay. Now here's the other piece that's really important. Remember when I talk about oversight, public accountability? So here's what's interesting. That statewide, that absentee database, that's a separate module. We know it's a separate module because, and what's really sick about this, is that you can only ask for the data from the beginning through October 30th. And when Steve Simon directed the traffic to extend the absentee ballot accepted all the way through November 10th, we're blind to 11 days worth of data on the form. Okay? Want to hide it. Here's the other thing that we actually did. We actually tracked the Wayback Machine. You can actually go to web.archive.org, and we actually tracked and walked back Steve Simon's website, where we actually tracked how many absentee ballots were requested and how many were received.
Wow.
And so isn't it interesting that you have a static number between November 4th and the 1st, and then on January 16th, it leaps forward with an additional 63,000 ballots. You literally can't make this stuff up. So when I talk, so when people ask, is there voter fraud out there? I'm not sure if it's by the voters, but it's certainly by a lot of other people. And here's how I know that this is just a big canard. You guys should be really, really pissed off. Are you ready? Are you pissed off yet?
Yeah, we are.
All right. You want another reason? And I'm going to get to why this became personal to me. All right. Yes, it gets worse. You guys remember Billy Mays?
Yes.
Oh, but wait, there's more? It's so true. That was his famous line. So since 2015, the Minnesota Secretary of State, Steve Simon's office, his elections director was chosen to lead the national effort to improve state voter rolls.
Oh, how ironic.
Isn't that awesome? Yeah. We are leading the nation. So remember when I said, yeah, we're probably #1 in cheating? Yeah, that'd be why. He's there. So this is since 2015. So that's 5 years. Let's evaluate his work productivity. So here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to not randomly pick another state like South Dakota, and I'm going to compare the two data sets side by side. This is where it gets personal. Yeah, that's my son. In 2018, we moved to South Dakota. My son, my wife, and I registered within a week of each other. I actually did a week earlier. My son and wife went in on the same day to get their driver's licenses and become registered residents of South Dakota and update their voter registration information. Minnesota removed my wife and I, but for whatever reason, they kept my son in the database over here. What's also interesting about this is in Minnesota, that's the left-hand side here, we can see his original registration date, and we only get that little fact pattern. In South Dakota, we get original registration date, last registration date, like if he moved, last updated date, and the date last voted. That's not available on the Minnesota side. We also get in South Dakota status active, inactive, or dead. In Minnesota, you only get to see the active ones.
That's why South Dakota's red.
Well, that's right. Yep. But here's another thing. I'm gonna knock South Dakota here. This database over here in Minnesota, where it's about 3.2 million records, is $46. For South Dakota, where it's about 680,000 records, is $2,500 to get that list. And then for a year, as long as you bought it within a year, each update is $200 after that.
My gosh.
Remember how scary COVID was?
Super duper.
All right. So these stats are a little bit old. Minnesota, I think, is at about, what, 10,000 people pass away due to comorbidities and COVID, however you want to term it. Well, actually, I have something that's even scarier. So this is between the November 29th, 2020 database and the September 26th, 2021 database. What's scary is that there were voters that registered in September of 2020 and they were removed. That was 38,686 of them. And don't worry, 29,484 of them voted. So this is where we need the half-gallon, gallon jugs to basically say, have you seen this voter? Because that is a real issue. They're gone. Same thing in October. 25,381. So when I talk about it's a living database, when we can't see who the inactive voters are, it's hard to do election integrity and to be able to do predictive analysis. Now remember when I said I was a political science major? So if I was trying to do a doctoral study here in the state of Minnesota on voting trends, I couldn't do it legitimately. Any professor should just look at me and just go, well, you don't know anything about the inactive voters. Why did they become inactive? I don't know. Can you go interview them? Not without years of data, because I'd have to have years prior to see when they became inactive so that I could track them and potentially go knock on their door to see if they still live there. Because remember, in the state of Minnesota, if you don't vote for 4 years, boop, they take you out of the database. So this little website you might want to take a picture of. So if you want to complain to somebody, complain to the courts, because Steve Simon is an attorney. So you should complain that as an officer of the court, he has a inability to actually follow law, follow the U.S. Constitution, because he did the consent decrees, these weird interpretations that he does to the counties and pushing the counties to basically commit fraud. So it's a simple form that you can go in, and we would encourage you to do that. Democrats do it to the Republicans all the time. And so if you want the board to actually do an investigation, you should do that. You could also file complaints against the, the unbiased judges that are out there. You can just do a Google search on the judges, and you can actually see that, one of the judges doing the consent decrees was on the campaign staff for even Coleman as well, the mayor of St. Paul, in his re-election.
Wow.
No, this is the second Coleman, not Norm. Chris Coleman.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So in looking at the 2021 election, most of the state actually went and voted in person. So even during COVID, so the last time, remember 58% voted absentee? We're now seeing a trend back towards around 78% in the 2021 election, coming back and voting at the actual polls, with a couple of exceptions. How many of you are familiar with downtown Minneapolis and the sky-high rises down there, the colorful buildings and stuff like that?
Colorful buildings.
Right. So there's some colorful language, and I apologize for this, but since it is on Wikipedia is listed this way, they're called the ghettos in the sky, crack stacks, Little Mogadishu. You've heard of all those? All right, so what's interesting is in that particular precinct, what actually happened, which was really crazy, is that it is the one that actually reverses the trend. So 72% of that, and what's kind of crazy is that there are 4 buildings, and the precinct is actually right in the main floor of kind of the common building between all of them. So it's not like they have to go very far. But 72% of them voted absentee in the 2021 election.
Delivered by the band.
Yep. So it is the only precinct that voted at that rate. So this is kind of another area where we kind of have to do a little bit of education. I'm going to encourage you to do that here as well. My belief is that many of the female immigrants are taken advantage of and don't understand how sacred their votes are. And we need to do a better job as a party to educate them that they shouldn't be having their potentially abusive families forcing and stealing their votes. Okay? So we need to open up that bridge and at least start that education. All right. Now it's time to get frank. pun directly intended. So on frankspeech.com, they have this statistic for Minnesota. We have tried numerous times to sit down with Mike Lindell and his team because I have grave concerns about his data. We tried for a month before we released our data. What we're looking at here is on their website, they list dates over here, IP addresses from where the county was hacked, and then the target IP address, which is allegedly the county's IP address. Okay? And then over on this side, they talk about how many votes were altered. I've been having a lot of conversations with Senator Mark Horan, who is the head of the Legislative Audit Committee. He has asked numerous times for Mike Lindell and his folks to come in and actually testify. The same thing is true of Kiffmeyer. And the state of Minnesota also had numerous representatives go to the symposium. And everyone that I've talked to was between upset and pissed that what was promised to be delivered to them was not received. Lindell has also missed every single self-appointed timeline that he has put out there. And this is why from early on, Susan and I were very clear with everybody. Don't rely on outsiders to come in and save the day. It's you. You have to save the day. You have to make your own way. Nobody else makes your business. You have to become the successful entrepreneur. That's how it's done in America. So, in the absence of being able to talk directly with their IT people, I went through and said, all right, I need to noodle this. I need to come up with a way to give clarity to the people that I talk to, because they always are always asking, what about Mike Lindell? What about this? What about that? Okay, let's put it to rest at this point. So think of an IP address like the address at your house. Okay? Each one is unique, right? The data packet is the letter coming to your house. So if your sister sends you a birthday card from Arizona and it's coming here to Minnesota, it goes from her house address to your house address. Okay? The other issue is that right away in the data that we see on his website, some of the counties are sharing the same IP address. It's actually impossible except for one situation. That situation is that that IP address is not at the county location. What that means is that IP address is a web server hosted by an outside vendor, which means that that website is nowhere near the election equipment. Okay? We were able to validate that. So the claim of vote injection claims, based upon the location of the web servers, separate from the voting machines, not likely. And then the claim is also that every single county in Minnesota got their security wrong. There are multiple different vendors that handle the security at the county level. We actually decided to take the next step. But let me back up. As an example, Dodge, Pine, and Pipestone are claimed to have all the same IP address. They actually do. They share the same company for hosting their web server. Single Hop LLC out of Michigan, not even in this state.
Wow.
Okay. Dodge is just near you guys here. Pine is north of the Twin Cities on 35, and Pipestone is next to me over by South Dakota's border. Okay? So now we know it's physically impossible for all three of those counties to be hacked, because remember, the election equipment is at the county, not in Michigan.
And that's for those IP?
Yep.
For Dodge, Pine, and Pipestone?
Correct. Yep.
And that's based on their protection or
I'll get to that. So now the next thing here is so then I had to take a step back. How can I look at this in a different way? So I've worked with a friend of mine to start another company. It's called D3 Defense. That company basically does physical, digital, and cultural security. Okay, what's cultural security? One sentence. If you treat your employees like garbage, of course you're not going to care about the first two. Okay. So we wanted to look at, are all of the addresses that Lindell points out secure? Are the taxpayers in Minnesota exposed with credit card security issues? Because some of you pay your taxes, might get a park permit fee, might get a permit for construction of a house, or tab renewals, etc. So then we wanted to pick a well-known standard that everybody would understand. How many of you have a credit card? Raise your hand. Great. That's the analysis that we were going to review. And then we wanted to pick a reputable source to examine the vulnerabilities. Part of my business on R&G Vision side is I work with nonprofits as well as corporate security firms to basically evaluate whether or not their websites, their storefronts, and the processes in the back end are keeping their clients' credit card accounts safe. All that information. It's actually called PCI compliance. Security Metrics is a vendor that we picked, because I've worked with them for years. And they basically started that credit card industry standard in 2006. So it's been around for a while. They are also, let's skip ahead here. And there's actually penalties that if you're not PCI compliant, your insurance carrier doesn't have to cover your losses when everybody sues you for not adhering to the standards. Okay. Security Metrics is a GSA scheduled approved vendor. So that means federally and state, they recognize them as the go-to people. So I want to make sure if I'm going to enter into this argument with Mike Lindell, I got to have my ducks in a row. So I'm picking the best vendor out there. So here's the shocker. All the counties in red, they fail basic credit card security standards out there. That's 52% of the counties. Also, the Secretary of State also failed as well. But here's the other thing that we do have to look at. 2 of the counties here in gold, they passed with 100% compliance, which means they weren't hackable.
Who was that?
So that is Lyons and Nobles County.
What are they doing?
Well, what they're doing is they're keeping it real basic, and they have no backdoors to their systems. What's interesting is that 6 of the counties failed at a critical level: Aitkin, Lequi Prairie, Lake, Lincoln, Todd, and Winona. Their sites are so insecure that I could actually log in and FTP upload files into their web server, log into their email servers, and actually send files from their servers out to other servers. That's how bad they are. Also, I'm going to give you this one here. So luckily, before I did this, I had a sit-down conversation with Senator Mark Horan. I had to wait until the legislature was out of session, because statutorily, as long as I advise him that I'm willing to do this scan at no cost to the Minnesota taxpayers, he has full authority to give me cover that I wouldn't be breaking any laws if I'm doing it under his authorization and knowledge. Otherwise, if the entire Senate was still in session, I'd have to go before committee to get that approval. And I didn't want to tip my hand to the Secretary of State, so that's why I had to wait so long to do this.
Where'd Olmsted fall in line there?
So Olmsted, I'm going to have to pull it up here. You guys did okay on this one.
That's good.
What's the significance of the height of the vertical bars?
So the significance of the height of the vertical bars is that when you're in the green zone area, you're pretty secure, but it's possible that your website is actually advertising the type of server that you're using, which makes it easier for hackers just to sit there and watch your website, and as they are aware of vulnerabilities, they can narrow the field as to know what hack to do towards your website. So we want to see counties like this where they don't even disclose that it's a Microsoft or an Apache server, as an example. Then as you go up, when you're in these in the yellow areas, it's possible that they're using lower security standards. So it's called an SSL. So that little padlock that you see up in your browser, about 2 years ago, there was a security standard that they said, don't use this anymore because we're really bad, and it was 1.0. There's supposed to be a 2.0 and a 2.1 that's supposed to be used, but we see a lot of counties still using the lower security, which makes it really easy for today's computers to guess those passwords and to get through and to monitor. When we get into the red zones up here, that's where the wheels start falling off. That's where it's like your admin password is exposed out there, your email's not using encrypted passwords, it's just using plain text. So I can easily guess it. I could just sit there and monitor your website and your web servers, and I could just break down the packets because none of them are secured, that I could literally just look at it. Or you're entering in a credit card and there's not even a padlock up there.
So if this is Minnesota, these are Minnesota counties, and there's that many unsecured counties,
correct,
and they're communicating with the state, and they're potentially communicating with other counties.
Well, this is
there's going to be other workarounds to hack even into the green networks.
Yeah, so think of it this way. It's even worse than that. So
oh, good.
But wait, there's more. There's actually, the state of Minnesota created kind of their own MinNet that is supposed to connect all of the counties and the state agencies together, that the Minnesota State IT Department basically runs. And that is supposed to be a secured network on the back end, but we actually have a little bit of evidence that that's not actually true, because some of the home employees that are remoting in are actually exposing the network.
Right.
One of the things that's supposed to happen that I should also mention is that your cities and counties, when they upload the information to the Secretary of State's office, they actually have to fill out a form. And that form requires the county and the cities to have a static IP address, so an address that's, they're only going to be able to upload the data from there. So then the IT person over at the Secretary of State's office basically pokes a hole in their firewall and says, okay, any traffic from this address, allow that in. So that means that if a city employee were to take that laptop that's supposed to upload the election data into, if they took it home, it wouldn't work, because that IP address wasn't approved. Okay, so that's kind of the weaker way that they do it, which is unfortunate. And I know that fact pattern because when I was mayor in 2016, I helped the city of St. Bonifacius, which I was mayor for, to basically fill out that worksheet, get a static IP address for the city, and then help the city clerk be able to log into the site, and make sure that everything worked. Because this was part of the implementation of the Canode poll pads, as part of the requirements. And so here's the other thing that we do know. When I was mayor in 2016, they actually Hennepin County sent the contract over to us to approve the Canode poll pads. You'll love this. In that contract, it said Hennepin County will not guarantee the data, the performance, or the reliability of the equipment, nor will they provide support for it. So I looked at my council and I said, as your mayor and as a computer professional, I can't sign this contract. There's just no way. We need to vote this thing down, and we need to figure out more of what's going on behind the scenes. So I actually got the contract from Hennepin County. They pressured us to try and sign the contract. We refused, especially after what we saw in the contract. In the contract, there's actually a diagram that shows that the Canode poll pads are directly communicating with the county as well as the Secretary of State's office. This is why I'm a proponent of removing all of those Canode poll pads. Here's why. When we did this scan, we did it on November 2nd and 1st on the Secretary of State's office. At that point in time, his data was open, that we could actually inject data in and query data out of his system. And so that tells us that those poll pads are live. And so when we think back to like one of the conspiracy theories, so normally attorneys are pretty careful when they send out tweets, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember the tweet that Keith Ellison sent out? Hurry up, get out and vote. We don't have enough votes yet. So with what I just told you, that there's a possibility that these poll pads are able to access the back end of the Secretary of State's database system, would it surprise you to learn that there are organizations out there that have massive databases and can predict who has voted and how they vote? And if they're able to see live who's cast a ballot and know that maybe enough people in certain districts haven't voted yet, and then all of a sudden you see significant activity throughout Minneapolis and Hennepin County to drive people out to vote, and then he deletes that tweet at about 7:30. So it kind of now, as we look at this and see the different data elements and the separation of the database modules, we now see, we go from conspiracy theory to look at the actions, and what Steve Simon has managed to create is now plausible. So that's where we're at. So
have you shared this information, or will you meet with the counties to put them on notice that there's still a VIP here?
Drakowski. So yes and no. We are relying on local activists to make the presentation with us at their side, because what we want to have happen is, with information like this, where now you know what's going on in your county, how you have an overall state review of what's going on, now you kind of have the reasons why we need to take a second look at the way that elections are conducted, and you need to play an active role. All of you have different gifts and talents. It's all hands on deck. So whether